The sound of expensive leather shoes clicking against imported marble echoed through the lobby of Pinnacle Tower, Chicago's most prestigious corporate headquarters. Every head in the vast atrium turned instinctively toward the source, then quickly looked away. Rashid Al Mansour had arrived. At 58, the real estate mogul owned 47 buildings across 3 continents and had enough political connections to make or break mayoral campaigns with a single phone call. His net worth fluctuated somewhere between ridiculous and obscene, and he made sure everyone knew it. "This floor is filthy," Rashid announced to no one in particular, his voice carrying across the polished stone. He dragged his finger along a windowsill and examined it with exaggerated disgust. "I pay $80,000 a month in maintenance fees for this building, and this is what I get." The morning shift employees froze. Security guards suddenly found their clipboards fascinating. The receptionist pretended to be deeply engrossed in her computer screen. They all knew what was coming. For 7 years, Rashid had owned the penthouse office suite on the 52nd floor. And for 7 years, he had made it his personal mission to publicly humiliate at least one staff member during his weekly Friday morning inspections. It was a ritual, a demonstration of dominance that kept everyone in line. "You there," he barked, pointing at a woman in a blue maintenance uniform who was emptying a trash bin near the elevators. "Come here." Dorothy Mitchell, 61 years old, set down her cart and walked over with measured steps. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform, though worn from years of use, was impeccably clean. She had been working the morning shift at Pinnacle Tower for exactly 3 weeks. "Yes, sir," she said, meeting his eyes directly. The directness of her gaze threw Rashid off for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "Do you see this dust?" He held up his finger. "This is unacceptable. What's your name?" "Dorothy Mitchell." "Well, Dorothy Mitchell, do you know how much money moves through this building every hour?" He circled her slowly, his designer suit probably worth more than she made in 6 months. "Billions. Billions of dollars. And you can't even keep a windowsill clean." A small crowd had gathered, other employees watching from a safe distance. Some were filming discreetly on their phones. This was standard Friday morning entertainment, though it never felt entertaining to the victims. "Sir, I cleaned that windowsill at 5:30 this morning," Dorothy replied calmly. "The construction on the 16th floor creates dust that circulates through the ventilation system. It settles within hours." Rashid's face darkened. Employees weren't supposed to explain. They were supposed to apologize and grovel. "Are you telling me how my building works? I've owned this property for 7 years. I think I know." "With all due respect," Dorothy interrupted gently, "I've been cleaning buildings for 43 years. I think I know dust." The lobby went silent. Someone near the elevator gasped audibly. No one interrupted Rashid Al Mansour. Ever. Rashid's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone. "What's your supervisor's name?" "Marcus Williams." "Marcus!" Rashid shouted across the lobby to a man in a maintenance supervisor uniform who had just emerged from a back corridor. "Get over here. Now." Marcus hurried over, already pale with dread. "Yes, Mr. Al Mansour. This woman is insubordinate. I want her fired immediately." Marcus glanced at Dorothy, then back at Rashid. "Sir, Mrs. Mitchell is one of our best. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. Fire her, or I'll find a maintenance company that understands the meaning of respect." Dorothy reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small tablet. "Mr. Al Mansour, before I leave, I thought you might want to see something." Rashid laughed harshly. "What, your resume? I assure you, I'm not interested in. It's about your son, Kareem." The laugh died in his throat. Kareem was his pride and joy, his 25-year-old son studying international law at Northwestern. The boy was everything Rashid had worked for, the heir to his empire. "You leave my son out of this," Rashid said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Dorothy tapped the tablet screen. "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, Kareem has been volunteering at the Chicago Workers' Rights Coalition for the past year. He's been helping low-wage workers file complaints against employers who engage in harassment and abuse." The color began draining from Rashid's face. "In fact," Dorothy continued, her voice steady and clear, "he helped me file a detailed complaint with the Department of Labor 3 weeks ago. That's why I took this job, Mr. Al-Mansour, to document everything." The lobby was now packed with people. Word had spread through the building like wildfire. Employees from other floors were finding excuses to pass through. "You're lying," Rashid stammered, but his conviction was wavering. Dorothy turned the tablet around. On the screen was a video call interface, and on it was a young man with Rashid's same dark eyes and strong jaw. "Hello, Father," Kareem said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Kareem? What is this? What are you?" "Mrs. Mitchell called me 20 minutes ago when you started your inspection," Kareem interrupted. "I've been watching everything through the security camera feed she had access to." "Dad, you promised you'd changed. After everything we talked about, after you swore you'd treat people with dignity." Rashid reached for the tablet, but Dorothy held it steady. "Son, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. I've watched the recordings from the past 3 weeks. 7 different people, Dad. 7 people you've humiliated in public. 1 woman quit because of you. Another had a panic attack in the bathroom. Marcus and the other employees watched in stunned silence as one of Chicago's most powerful men began to crumble. Mrs. Mitchell has a master's degree in social work," Kareem continued. "She spent 30 years as a counselor before her clinic lost funding. She took this cleaning job to make ends meet and to help me gather evidence of workplace harassment." Dorothy's voice was gentle but firm. "Your son reached out to our coalition 6 months ago, Mr. Al-Mansour. He told us about your behavior. He wanted to help stop it." Rashid staggered backward, leaning against a pillar. "You're working against me? My own son?" "I'm working for you, Dad," Kareem said, his voice cracking slightly. "For the man I know you can be, not the tyrant you've become. Mrs. Mitchell has documented everything. The verbal abuse, the threats, the way you use your wealth as a weapon. It's all going to the Labor Department, the media, and the Building Tenants Association." A woman in a business suit stepped forward from the crowd. "Mr. Al-Mansour, I'm Jennifer Chun, president of the Tenants Association. We've been collecting complaints about your behavior for 2 years. We now have enough documentation to begin removal proceedings as majority building owner." Rashid's empire, built on intimidation and fear, was collapsing in real time. His phone began buzzing incessantly. News outlets, board members, investors, everyone had somehow gotten wind of what was happening. "How?" Rashid whispered, looking at Dorothy. "How did you orchestrate all of this?" Dorothy smiled, and it was kind despite everything. "Mr. Al-Mansour, I didn't orchestrate anything. You did. Every Friday, for 7 years, you chose to hurt people who couldn't fight back. Your son chose to fight back for them. I just helped him do it." "Dad," Kareem said from the screen, "I love you, but I can't stand by anymore while you destroy people's dignity for sport. The coalition is filing formal charges. The tenants are pursuing removal, and I'm resigning from the family business until you get help." The lobby was now filled with at least 100 people. Several local news vans had pulled up outside, tipped off by someone in the building. The hashtag Pinnacle Tyrant was already trending on social media. Rashid looked around at all the faces of people he'd terrorized, dismissed, treated as invisible. For the first time in decades, he saw them not as servants or obstacles, but as human beings who had quietly banded together to end his reign. "I built this empire from nothing," he said weakly, more to himself than anyone else. I came to this country with $200 in my pocket, and somewhere along the way, Dorothy said softly, you forgot what it felt like to be powerless. You forgot that wealth doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just gives you more responsibility to do right. Marcus stepped forward hesitantly. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the building. Security has been instructed to escort you out. As two security guards approached, Rashid made one last desperate attempt. You can't do this. You own 35% of this building, Jennifer Chen interrupted. The other 65% just voted to ban you from the premises pending the results of the Labor Department investigation. Rashid's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, and his face went ashen. My board of directors is calling an emergency meeting. They're probably going to ask you to step down, Dorothy said, not unkindly. Your son made sure they all received copies of the documentation this morning. As security escorted Rashid toward the exit, he stopped and turned back to Dorothy. Why? He asked, genuinely confused. Why go through all this trouble? Dorothy looked at him with eyes that had seen decades of struggle and survival. Because 43 years ago, a man just like you fired my mother from her cleaning job for speaking up about harassment. She never recovered from the shame. She died thinking she deserved to be treated that way. She paused, letting the words sink in. I made her a promise on her deathbed that I would never let another bully go unchallenged. Your son gave me the chance to keep that promise. The doors of Pinnacle Tower closed behind Rashid Al-Mansour for the last time as the primary owner. The crowd that had gathered began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a roar that echoed through the marble atrium. But Dorothy didn't stay for the celebration. She quietly picked up her cleaning cart and headed toward the service elevator. There were still floors to clean, and unlike some people, she understood that honest work was never beneath anyone's dignity. 6 months later, the conference room on the 52nd floor of Pinnacle Tower had been completely transformed. Where Rashid's opulent office once stood, there was now the Chicago Workers' Dignity Center, a nonprofit organization providing legal aid and support services to low-wage workers facing harassment and abuse. Dorothy sat at the head of a long table, reviewing case files with a team of volunteers. Her title now was Director of Community Outreach, though she insisted on still wearing her maintenance uniform one day a week to remember where she'd come from. Mrs. Mitchell, you have a visitor, announced a young intern at the door. Dorothy looked up to see Kareem Al-Mansour standing in the doorway, looking uncertain and tired. Kareem, she said warmly, gesturing to a chair. Come in. How are you? He sat down heavily. My father wants to meet with you. He's been in therapy for 5 months now. He's lost most of his holdings, and the criminal charges were reduced to fines and community service. But he says he wants to apologize. In person. Dorothy studied the young man's face. She could see the toll this had taken on him, the guilt of bringing down his own father, mixed with the relief of finally stopping the harm. What do you think I should do? She asked gently. Kareem sighed. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to believe he's changed. But another part remembers all the times he promised to be better and then went right back to his old ways. Your father built his identity around power and fear, Dorothy said. Taking that away from him might be the kindest thing anyone's ever done for him, even if he can't see it yet. Will you meet with him? Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, thinking of her mother, thinking of all the people who'd been crushed under the weight of bullies like Rashid, thinking of the hundreds of workers who'd found courage to speak up after her story went viral. Yes, she finally said, I'll meet with him, but not because he deserves my forgiveness, because he needs to see that the people he tried to make invisible are still here, still standing, still human. That's the only way forward. Kareem's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I don't know what else to say except thank you. Dorothy smiled and patted his hand. You already said everything that needed to be said, Kareem. That day in the lobby, when you chose conscience over comfort. That's the thanks I need. 3 months later, the meeting took place in a small coffee shop in a working-class neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, far from the gleaming towers of downtown. Rashid arrived on public transportation, a humbling experience that Dorothy suspected was part of his court-ordered community service. He looked different. Older, certainly. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by ordinary clothes. But more than that, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Uncertainty, humility, perhaps even the beginning of understanding. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said quietly, sitting across from her. Dorothy nodded, waiting. I've spent the past 8 months trying to understand how I became the person I was, Rashid began, his voice shaking slightly. My therapist says I confuse fear with respect, control with success. I thought making people feel small would make me feel bigger. He paused, struggling with the words. I want to apologize, not for getting caught, but for the harm I caused. To you, to everyone in that building, to the hundreds of people I hurt over the years. I can't undo it, but I want you to know I see it now. I see you now. Dorothy listened in silence, her expression neutral. I don't expect forgiveness, Rashid continued. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you and my son did, exposing me, humiliating me, it saved my life. The life I was living wasn't really living at all. It was just consuming, destroying. He pulled out a worn notebook. I've been keeping a list. Every person I can remember hurting. There are 143 names so far, and I'm still remembering more. I'm trying to make amends to each one, even though most won't talk to me. For the first time, Dorothy spoke. What made you think you had the right to treat people that way? Rashid flinched at the directness of the question. I think somewhere along the way, I started believing my own mythology. That I was special. That my success meant I was better than everyone else. That wealth was a measure of worth. And now I'm a 58-year-old man who has to rebuild his relationship with his son, who lost most of his fortune to legal fees and settlements, who volunteers at a food bank 3 days a week as part of his sentence. He smiled bitterly. Now I'm learning what I should have known all along. That every person matters, regardless of their job or bank account. Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, studying this broken man across from her. She thought about revenge, about justice, about the satisfaction she'd felt watching him fall. But she also thought about her mother and what she would have wanted. Mr. Al-Mansour, she said finally, I appreciate your apology, but the person you really need to make peace with is yourself. The person you hurt the most was you. You spent decades building a prison of your own making, and now you have to do the hard work of learning how to live free. Rashid nodded, tears streaming down his face. How do I do that? One day at a time, one person at a time, one act of genuine kindness at a time. Dorothy stood up to leave, then paused. And maybe remember that the people who cleaned your building, who emptied your trash, who you never bothered to see, we've always been here. We've always mattered. You just needed to fall far enough to see us at eye level. As she walked out of the coffee shop, Dorothy felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Not because Rashid had apologized, but because she'd realized something important. His redemption wasn't her responsibility. Her responsibility was to keep doing the work, keep fighting for dignity, keep making sure that people like her mother never felt invisible again. 1 year later, Dorothy's story had sparked a national movement. The hashtag #DignityAtWork campaign had led to new legislation protecting low-wage workers from harassment. Dozens of corporations had implemented zero-tolerance policies. Workers across the country found courage to document abuse and speak up. The Chicago Workers' Dignity Center now had satellite offices in 12 cities. Dorothy's book, Seen and Heard: Why Dignity Matters More Than Power, had become required reading in business schools across America. But every morning, Dorothy still put on her maintenance uniform and spent 2 hours cleaning the lobby of Pinnacle Tower. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to remember, to stay grounded, to honor her mother and all the invisible workers who'd come before. And on Friday mornings, when young executives rushed through the lobby in their expensive suits and designer shoes, some of them would stop and say hello to the gray-haired woman pushing the cleaning cart. Some even asked her advice on leadership and ethics, because Dorothy Mitchell had taught them something their MBA programs never could: that true power isn't measured by how many people fear you, but by how many people you lift up. That dignity isn't given by wealth or status. It's recognized in every human being, or it means nothing at all. As for Rashid Al-Mansour, he completed his community service and used what remained of his fortune to establish a foundation supporting workers' rights. He and Kareem were slowly rebuilding their relationship, learning to connect as humans rather than as tyrant and heir. He never returned to his old way of life. Some said he'd been destroyed. Others said he'd finally been freed. But everyone agreed on one thing: the day a 61-year-old cleaning lady looked him in the eye and refused to look away was the day everything changed. Not just for Rashid, but for thousands of workers who realized that they too could stand up, speak out, and reclaim the dignity that had always been theirs. One conversation at a time. One act of courage at a time. One Friday morning at a time.